Thank you, and I appreciate everybody being here because I know it's a lovely, sunny November day. It's a level 1 snow emergency back in Toledo, so if you have nice weather in November, there's lots of fun things you can be out doing it. My name is Markie Miller. It's kind of nice that I hear people struggle saying Toledoans all the time because I was really nervous about saying words like Caloosahatchee when I was down here, so glad that we can share that struggle. I'm really honored to be here tonight. I get opportunities to speak in front of a lot of groups, but when you get to speak in front of citizens that are really revved up and thinking about taking something like this on, that's really the greatest honor that a group like mine could hope to achieve. Of course, I'm just one of many dedicated organizers in Toledo. We all helped advance the Lake Erie Bill of Rights, and I want to share that journey with you a little bit and those conclusions that my community came to as we started down this path. So 5 years ago, Toledo experienced a crisis that made international news. August 3rd of 2014, 500,000 people in Toledo and our neighboring communities woke up to alerts with a dire warning about our tap water. Do not drink, do not touch, do not bathe. A toxic algal bloom of cyanobacteria had rendered our tap water and the open waters of the western Lake Erie Basin an untouchable toxic mess. And this event shut down our city. Within hours, bottled water became completely scarce. Prices soared, and its value was immeasurable. Work hours were cut back for employees, sent home without the pay that they relied on. Those without access to transportation and media were isolated and stranded. Expectant and new mothers felt completely vulnerable in a waterless world. And in town, the restaurants and the shopping centers closed, which was perhaps a luxury that several other institutions couldn't afford. Hospitals, care facilities, all places that were tested on their creativity and on their resourcefulness, totally unsure of what consequences might result if an error is made. I suppose the silver lining of that crisis was that it laid the foundation for the further growth of a grassroots movement that was already well seated throughout Ohio, the rights of nature movement. The right of our life-sustaining ecosystems to exist, flourish, and thrive. And in recognizing the legal right of the lake, it meant recognizing our right to say no. No to the legal and regulated harm carried out through permits by extractive, industrialized, and inherently unsustainable activities. And even today, as my community continues to object to those state-issued permits that inflict a financial, health, and environmental burden onto my community, we're told that we're the ones who are overstepping. Refusing to allow this trend of legalized harm to continue, Toledoans for Safe Water was formed, a group of regular people residing in Toledo concerned about our water, our health, and the rights of all Ohioans. And we saw that our best course of action was to amend our city charter by a vote of the people. Working with the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund, we explored what this law would look like. And we sat down and we wrote it, we circulated it, and we campaigned for it. It's now the first rights of nature law for a specific ecosystem in the United States. Our volunteers collected 10,500 signatures. We put this on the ballot, allowed the community to vote on it, which of course was not easy, but we didn't think it would be. We knew that the path we chose was going to be one we had to build ourselves. And on this journey, we were met with objections all the time, told no by our Board of Elections, left waiting by the Ohio Supreme Court, bullied by corporate interest, and dismissed by hesitant politicians. However, poisoned by corporate harms, we really had no choice but to endure all of it. And eventually we won our right to a special election. And despite all of those people and organizations and entities telling us, no, you don't have the right to do this, the people voted and they said yes. Yes, we do. And when it comes to Lake Erie, not only is this about our health, but it's about preventing corporate harm at the expense of our basic democratic rights. Our action to write and pass the Lake Erie Bill of Rights was based on necessity. A large percentage of Toledoans had watched the lake die in the 60s and the 70s. Many more of us grew up, like me, always assuming that's a dead lake, that's the dirty lake. We don't go there. We don't vacation there, we don't swim there, but we drink out of it. And after the water crisis, I would hear statements like, when are they going to come in and save us? What are they going to do about this? When are they going to fix this? And it became clear to me that those statements, when they were saying they, that had to be us. We were the ones that had to do this. Nobody was coming to save us. Nobody was coming to help us. During our campaign, we were called outsiders, meddlers, and extremists. A message that infiltrated our local radio stations and arrived in our own Toledo mailboxes. Protecting the health of a lake that sustains us is not extreme. And putting a decision before the people and the community that live there is not meddling. That message, by the way, was crafted and paid for by BP out of Houston, Texas, which, if you didn't know, is just a little bit outside of Toledo. They spent $300,000 to discredit our organizers and discourage our residents from voting on a law that revoked their right to pollute. We had already suffered the loss of our water, the trust in our tap, and now we saw our rights eroded before our eyes. It was no longer a game of speculation or risk assessment. We understood all too well that everything was at stake. But to do nothing was a guarantee that we'd lose it all no matter what. So we could remain obedient to unjust laws that destroyed and oppressed us, or we could start to break down those barriers and empower people to protect and sustain the environments, their homes, and their rights. This February, despite those expensive scare tactics, we passed the Lake Erie Bill of Rights with 61% of the vote. We now recognize her right to exist, to be healthy, and in return our right to have a clean and safe environment. We continue to be challenged despite the vote, and that's okay. Because as we say often in Ohio, we don't lose until we quit, and we don't quit. There's an energy that embodies this movement, and it's not one that's easily extinguished. It can be seen clearly when I speak to residents here in Southwest Florida, and tears form in their eyes. This is work that's built on love. It's built on dedication. And that's the energy. That's what fuels it. The rights of nature movement is not deterred or threatened by a desire to uphold the status quo. And I'm constantly inspired by the passion of my fellow organizers, the willingness of my community to say no more, and by communities like yours, who face a threat and refuse to stay silent. We knew we needed to see drastic changes, and that may be seen as a little controversial. But it's that confrontation between our evolving cultural values up against those oppressive legal standards that aid in the building of a movement. And when our unjust laws make it unsustainable, backed by illegitimate and unjust systems, we have an obligation to take action. The thought of making waves and sweeping systemic changes or being challenged makes you uncomfortable right now in this moment. Please keep in mind that it was uncomfortable in August of 2014 to wait in line for a ration of water. It was uncomfortable to be afraid to take a shower, to be sent home without pay, or worry about what you've been exposed to over the years and what health risks might lie in your future. Personally, I don't think I can really fathom the discomfort of ecological collapse in this wake of climate change. So, Southwest Florida, this is my story, but the knowledge that I offer is only as good as the action that it inspires. So my hope is that you evaluate this moment, recognize that you're making history, and make the decision to be the authors of your own story. The future of my law is uncertain, but our determination to save Lake Erie, defend our rights, and protect our community will always be unwavering. Thank you.
Oh my God, this is so exciting. I'm the Ohio organizer, not the Florida organizer. That's Sherry and Carl over there, and all you people in this room who are from this county, Lee County. And I'm so touched, I guess, that you guys thought that Ohio could influence and help you guys in some way. Some of you might be thinking, I guess now after seeing all this, you know, what is, I mean, because I know in Ohio a lot of times people get very confused because it's a lot. It's a lot to have thrown at you at one night. You know, what is this community rights and rights of nature movement really all about? Well, it's about realizing that our communities, including the environment, are being seriously harmed. It's about realizing that our government and government agencies are not really protecting our health, safety, and welfare, and certainly not nature's, but rather protecting and legalizing the polluter's profits. And finally, after realizing all of this, it's about no longer simply accepting. No longer accepting poisoned water, toxic air, increasing cancer rates, and the death of the Caloosahatchee River. Did I say it right? Yes. I've been practicing that all day. And possibly just accepting the possibility of the extinction of all life on this planet. Yeah. It's about no longer accepting and instead focusing on change. And make no mistake, the big industries alongside the public officials that they have bought off, they will fight to the death to maintain the status quo. So your local effort is about joining a movement of others who realize that our environmental vandalism is violating the rights of future generations. We're all born into a world we didn't make, and we have to realize that our actions or our inactions leave a legacy for the future to inherit. If we expect basic justice of clean water, air, and a livable climate from our predecessors, don't we owe this to future generations? And we start in our local communities because people are affected locally. Also because local's where we live. It's where we have emotional ties. Today we had a interview with a reporter, and Sherry was there, and Sherry started getting all teared up when she talked about your community. Markie does the same in Toledo. I did the same in Broadview Heights. It just shows how connected we are to our place, to our communities, and to nature in the community. Chico, California is an example. They were totally devastated by wildfires. Well, guess what? They're initiating new local laws and policies for the future. They're not relying on the state. And Toledo, Ohio suffered the water crisis that Markie described, and what did they do? They initiated new local law. And Fort Myers and other Florida communities, you've been directly affected by red tide and different algae blooms, and you now have to step forward and protect your local communities by drafting your own local laws. It's when you realize firsthand, when you suffer these harms, that the government is not protecting you, nature, or your community. And we all realize that those with the power and control to make decisions and laws want to maintain the status quo. They don't want change. In Ohio, they're fighting really hard to stop this whole idea of rights of nature. I mean, it's really extreme. It's really extreme. So, like Markie said, there's a lawsuit 12 hours after they passed. I mean, they got to celebrate that night. It was really fun. I was there with the group, and oh my God, we were so happy. 12 hours later, we woke up the next morning. It's like the lawyers calling, guess what? First lawsuit's been filed to overturn the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. So if you do get it on the ballot and you do win, celebrate really hard, okay, that night. So not only is the state of Ohio in a lawsuit right now, but they're on the side of the corporate entity that brought the lawsuit to overturn the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. You would think they'd be on the side of the people, right, protecting the water, but they're not. They're on the side of the polluter. And not only that, but they inserted language this past summer into the summer's budget bill, and it was a law written, the language was written by the Chamber of Commerce, and this is rich, okay? They handed it to one of our legislators, and he obliged and inserted it in there. It says that nature or any ecosystem does not have standing to bring any action in any court of common pleas, and neither does any person on behalf of or representing an ecosystem. So they inserted that and passed that. This is a clear example of corporate entities making the laws that restrict people, harm nature, and benefit themselves. Basically what it is we the people are being very obedient and following laws written by corporations. Don't you think that should be flipped around? I do. But on top of all this, the state, who claims, okay, in the lawsuit, that they are the protectors of Lake Erie, are at the same time issuing more permits for more big corporate agricultural entities to go into Northwest Ohio that cause the harm. I know this all sounds like really horrible news, doesn't it? But it's really not. It's not horrible. This is good. Because all their efforts to squash rights of nature in Ohio, it means that the status quo is feeling threatened. Which means we're on the right track. Which means you're on the right track. It also means, as they do this, that the people trying to suppress and squash the people's efforts, they're exposing their true colors to more people. It exposes what kind of community, state, and world they want to perpetuate. So when they react so strongly against rights of nature, the Lake Erie Bill of Rights, and even the people proposing and passing laws to protect their community, it exposes their true motivations, and that helps us. It helps us change the conversation, change people's minds, change culture. And when we do that, then the laws follow after that. There's really an inspiring case, and if you're interested in reading it, you can look it up, because there's 3 individuals in Toledo who helped with the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. And so, you don't get an opportunity very often that you actually passed a law. And so if you passed it, it's like you better use it, and use it really quick in this case, because it might not be law for very long. So these 3 residents filed a lawsuit against the state of Ohio, and they used the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. And I just want to read you just a little bit from it, because these residents, it's beautifully written, and it's called Mike Ferner is the case versus the state of Ohio, and it's in the Lucas County Common Pleas Court. But one of the things the state did immediately is they filed a motion to dismiss, right? They do that often. We're just going to dismiss the people. So in their brief, they stated, which is kind of comical, that the plaintiffs, which are the people in Lake Erie, have not suffered any concrete injuries. So the people wrote in their brief, plaintiffs assert that ecological reality is more important than legal ideology. All life depends on clean water, breathable air, healthy soil, a habitable climate, and complex relationships formed by living creatures and natural communities. Social morality must emerge from a humble understanding of this reality. Law is integral to social morality, so law must emerge from this understanding too. In this case, this court is presented with an opportunity to help change Ohio law so that it may adequately respond to both the Lake Erie crisis and the global environmental crisis. Injuries to the Lake Erie ecosystem and watershed are injuries to all who depend on the lake. Therefore, plaintiffs have suffered more than an injury. They have suffered many. Their drinking water has been poisoned and continues to be poisoned. They experience harmful algae blooms every summer, and no one who has ever visited the shores of Lake Erie in the vicinity of an algae bloom can claim that these injuries are speculative or abstract. And if citizens could use the Lake Erie Bill of Rights to alleviate the problem corporate power enables, if they could eliminate the phosphorus added to the Lake Erie watershed by corporate factory farms in Ohio, they could eliminate the single biggest source of pollution in the Lake Erie watershed. It is clear then that the poisoning of Lake Erie that the state insures and protects could be redressed by the relief the plaintiffs request. So in other words, it's like they're saying, this is, and we hear this all the time, this is too complicated. How are you gonna, institute this? How is this gonna work? You'll hear that a lot if you do this. And it's really not that complicated because we know where the pollution's coming from. We need to stop it. So it needs to be prohibited. So instead of the state issuing more permits for more of the harm to occur, they need to actually be shutting some of it down. But they don't have the will to do that. Spoken of when we are gone as bad ancestors or good ancestors. Well, by being here tonight, by getting involved and volunteering with this great group of local concerned activists to move rights of nature forward, you've taken the first steps to being remembered as good ancestors. And it's really hard work, but anything worth fighting for usually is. So thank you for inviting us. We support and stand with you in solidarity from Ohio.
There's a question in the back.